don't know about LSP already, we are quite the nonprofit membership-based organization. We cover quite a lot of work in the state. You know, right now I'm calling in from the soil health program. We work with farmers on things like no-till, cover crops, and rotational grazing. We host large events like the one you're on today, and we also do smaller peer-to-peer learning groups along with other pieces of work. We also have a farm beginnings program that helps beginning farmers get onto land. They also work around farm transitions. So if you're a retiring farmer and you're looking for someone to take over your land that does a good job, that is a program to connect with. We also have a policy and organizing program that works on things like the farm crisis that is currently happening. We also take on factory farms. You know, when a large expansion operation is looking to take place in a rural community, especially if the water's already in jeopardy, that is what that program will work on. We also have a membership program. So if you're interested in becoming a member of LSP, you can go onto our website and join us. You know, it's a really powerful way of being a part of a good group of people who are trying to do the right thing for the land, promote sustainable agriculture, and protect the valuable resources that we have. All right, and then kind of a new piece to the organization is technically kind of separate is the Land Stewardship Action Fund. So this is a wing of the organization that works on moving our values that we have around community, land, water, healthcare, whatever it may be, more into the political sphere. We really want to start holding our politicians accountable. So that means, you know, if our farmers are saying soil health is really valuable and we need to see this move at the state level, we should be able to turn to our representatives who have signed on with us and say, look, you said that you would support this, and we really need to make a difference within our policies to support the good work that's happening. And if you're interested in learning more about that, there is a website, and maybe we can drop that into the chat later. Otherwise, Emily, who's on the call, would be a good person to connect with as well. All right, and then real quick again, our soil health program. Work on these large events, grazing groups, soil hubs, and we're really big on farmer-to-farmer networking. So we really believe that some of the best information and best learning experiences for farmers are farmers talking to one another. And that's why we have Rod Nelson on today. He's had his share of learning experiences throughout the past few years, and he's a great person to speak on no-till and cover crops. We also believe that whether you farm conventionally or organically, we all have room to improve on soil health. So this is a really great unifying way for farmers to come together and learn together, even if they're organic, even if they're vegetable crop farmers or conventional crop farmers. It's really quite a unifying message. And then lastly, our Soil Builders Network is a opt-in network of farmers. We send out a newsletter specifically to this group with good resources and sharing farmer stories. So we are going to actually see if people would like to opt into that later today. I'll take a poll towards the end of the event. And if you're interested in being a part of that network, all you have to do is just click yes when that question comes up. We would love to have you a part of the Soil Builders Network. All right, and then real quick again, let's go over the agenda. Once I'm done talking here at about 1:15, we're gonna break up into small group discussions. We'll take about 20 minutes for people just to get to know one another and share what they've been learning over the past year, if you've been trying cover crops or whatever that may be. We're gonna come back together as a large group, and hopefully people will be sharing what they've learned in the chat, or I might just have to call on some people to tease out what it was being shared in our small group discussions. Rod is going to present from 1:45 to about 2:25. We've got his presentation all lined up. We will take some question and answers during the presentation, but if it's an overwhelming amount, we might have to click along. And then at 2:25, I'm going to stop us, just check to see where people are at. I'm going to send out a poll, and that I can actually share the results on. So we'll take a survey together and see what's happening with this group. And then if people want to, we can go from 2:30 to 2:45 with a little bit more Q&A for Rod. But if you need to take off, that's fine too. You can always just leave the meeting. Okay. So that is it on my intro. While we're in this big gallery view, I hope everyone can see everyone else. If you can't, go up to your right-hand corner and there's a way you can switch between speaker view and gallery view. What you want to see is a lot of faces on your screen, if possible. And I'll give a few seconds here. I see that there are some people who are kind of look like they're messing around with their screen. Is for everyone who can to turn on your video. If you're able to, please turn on your video. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a big group wave and we're going to take a picture because that's what we do. All right. So if you are ready, please just smile or wave or do whatever you want. And Alex is going to take a picture while we're all being goofy. I mean, if you want to make a face, go for it. All right, looks like we're good. Thank you. Thanks for indulging me. Okay, and then I'm also curious too, for how many people is this your first time being on Zoom? Can you just raise your hand if this is your first time? See, one. Rod is up there too. Yeah. Yep. Awesome. Good. We've probably got about 6 to 8 people. Great. Thank you so much for coming on. I know it's a little bit difficult to figure out these digital spaces, but we really like to see you on here. Okay. So now I'm going to break us up into small group discussions. So what we're going to do is Alex is going to drop into the chat the questions that we're going to use in our small group discussions. So you'll be able to look at your chat box, go to the bottom, and this will be the discussion that you guys are having as a small group. I'm going to break us up into about groups of 5. So hopefully that works out in terms of numbers that we have here. It might be a 4 or 5, something like that. And then go ahead, look at those questions and start to get to know one another. You're not going to have one of us LSP people in your group because there's quite a few of us on here. We'll check in if we can, but really this is a time for you to engage with other people on this digital space. So you're going to want to make sure you take yourself off of mute and go ahead and introduce yourself. Okay. Do we have any questions, or is anyone kind of concerned on what we're doing here? If so, you can raise your physical hand or your Zoom hand, whatever one's most convenient. Okay, looks like everyone's very excited. All right, let's try this.
Live now.
Looks like we've got everyone back. Great, great. Thanks for doing that, and I hope you guys had some good conversations. If you wouldn't mind, could people take the time to just go ahead and put in the chat some of the discussions that you were having? Anything interesting that came up in your small group discussions? We're just going to take about 5 minutes just to hear some of the conversations that were going on. Yeah, Alex just put a note in the chat. Note takers, please drop 1 to 2 questions that came up in your small groups. So anyone who's one of those avid note takers, please give us some of your topics that you guys covered. If you would rather just speak out loud, you could also raise your hand and we can just hear directly from you too. Kathy Ayler says at the very end, someone was asking about vertical tilling and we didn't get a chance to discuss it. Yeah, sorry. I know these Zoom meetings kind of cut you off right in the middle when you're talking. How about Jared Lumen? Can I call on you to share some of the things that you guys discussed in your group? You can unmute yourself.
Did you ask me? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you mind sharing?
Sorry. Yeah. About our group. So we were discussing, well, we started off discussing kind of no-till gardening and different options for that. Things like mulch gardens and using straw and different ways to maintain or suppress weed pressure in gardenings. And then we kind of discussed a little bit of fall planting of cover crops and how to apply manure with minimal disturbance manure applicators, kind of as a tool to not have to do fall tillage when you're applicating manure, or spring or any tillage when you're applicating manure, and continue a no-till operation for a lot of those farms that depend on or that have a lot of manure to apply. And that's something I've been interested in because there's so many farms who depend on that. So that was kind of an interesting discussion.
Great, thank you, Jared. I'm seeing in the chat box too, Noah Kruger is saying that how can we cut down on tilling? That's one question that came up. How does interseeding work? And is there a better alternative for hay than alfalfa? So those are some of the questions that came up in that small group discussion. Scott Johnson's asking for anyone who wants to answer, what's everyone using to stop growth of the cover? So you can type that into the chat if you would like. Another thing from Kathy Ayler says, another main thing was capturing carbon with no-till and cover crops. Minimize carbon loss and build up carbon in the soil. Soil biology as the key versus soil physics, which is what is used to be taught, right? That's usually what universities talk about a lot more. I know I saw Lance Klessig said that you guys discussed Rod's tractor collection. Take my word for it, it's pretty impressive. I've been in that room and it's a whole wall, yep. Ali says, room 2, discuss animals along with crops. If you're renting out your land, are you changing the rent schedule as you require no-till or cover crops? Yep. All right, lots of really good questions. Okay, so I think what we're going to do now is go on to actually have Rod present here. So Rod, if you would like to take yourself off of mute, and I will pull up your presentation. You guys will have to forgive us. I'm going to be sharing his screen, so he's going to have to give me orders on when to change the slide. Okay.
Huh? Well, hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yep,
Yeah.
we can hear you.
Okay. I'm Rod Nelson, and I farm by Chatfield. I raise corn and soybeans primarily on the farm. This is the back side of the farm here. Here's me. We pulled out the ear of corn out of this year's production, and looks pretty good so far. If we don't get some rain pretty soon, we've had about a ½ inch in the last month. If we don't get some pretty good rain, we're going to be yeah, sunk. Next slide. The no-till farmer did an article on me back in 2011. And just to tell you a little bit about how I got started and why I got started with no-till, I'll read. You probably can't see the reading on your computer. Some of you will see, but some of you won't. No-till planters and advanced fertilizer application tools are helping Rod Nelson advance his decades-old no-till operation in Minnesota. In 1977, Rod Nelson had accumulated enough savings to pay down 348 acres of farmland near Chatfield in the rolling hill country of southeastern Minnesota. But with no outside help or inheritance, it left him cash strapped. For any new tractors or equipment, he was farming with a Case 800 tractor he bought for $700. He was in need of an idea. No-till innovators were getting attention at the time, and things I read and heard about this new way of farming seemed to be a natural for someone in my situation with highly erodible land. And that was Ron Ross introducing me. And the article was about 3 or 4 pages long. I just have one page on it. But it just tell you a little bit in my own words. I had some land, but I didn't have much money. I had very little money. Farmed that 348 acres with a 700 case I bought for $700. Next slide. Here's a little bit of the planting planter I got. I still got this planter. I've had it about 12 years. It's got dry fertilizer on. It's got liquid fertilizer on. It has a tank in the back of the tractor for roll support. This is the tank we use to bring the fertilizer to the field. The tanks hold 600 gallons. The dry fertilizer, it isn't in this picture, but I had that too. Next slide. Here, my son bought this 3800 24 roll Kinsey last spring, and this planter is somewhat of an improvement over mine. It does a better job of making this roll support, cuts through trash better, and it's just an improvement. Next slide. Here is where I planted in soybean stubble with my planter, and you know, it does a great job on soybean ground. This looks just like you'd see it in any magazine. It's just a very good planter. Next slide. Here it shows corn after corn. It's planted with my planter, and you can see there's a little bit of stalks and stuff in the row there, but the corn came up good, and there's it just works out good. Next slide. Corn on corn. It says bean ground on there. Here's corn stalks. The beans are no-tilled into them. They're use 15-inch rolls, the same thing, same planter we use for cover crops. They're 15-inch rows. There's a lot of residue out here, and they came up, you know, very good. Next slide. Next slide. Here's some corn on bean ground, taken the 29th of June. It just looks good in every way. Couldn't be happier with anything other than this no-till planter. Next slide. Yeah. And finally, we get to the harvesting. And this is a fun time of the year, but last year it was kind of a drag. It went on into middle of January and finally got done with it, thank goodness. But it's every bit as good as corn raised on conventional tillage. And the costs are less, and the fuel is less. Next slide. Most of our farmland is on hills. It's pretty hilly land down in this area. And we plant all of it, or most of it, what we can, on contours. So you won't find a very lot of straight rows on our farm. It's just done to save soil. Next page, next slide. Here's, we're not going to talk a lot about no-till, but we'll mention it as we go along. In 2013 was the year of prevent plant, and everybody was, most everybody was, had some of this prevent plant land. And here it shows my Tyler, or my plant in the rye. It was, I don't know how we got that tillage radish, but this was planted in July or August in 2013, and the corn was planted into rye on the 25th of May of 2014. And this was this experience worked really well, because you got a chance to plant the rye or whatever you're using for a cover crop. There was a lot of different things you could use. And I used, what are they? Tillage radish and crimson clover. The clover didn't come very well, but the tillage radish, the tillage radish came very well. And it, they were some big plants. We didn't have to do anything with weed control, and they were so nice the next spring to plant in. It was just like a garden. And here Tyler is planting in some rye. He also had some different mixes of cover crops. He had about 5 or 6 of them, and all of it worked really well. It just did good. Next slide.
Hey, Rod.
Yeah.
Got a question here. Do you chop your corn stalks, or do you have a chopping corn head?
We do not chop the stalks. We do not have a chopping corn head. We just harvest and plant. Now there's, you know, it's getting to be a bigger problem every year that goes on here. We're getting more corn stalks, and it's harder to get a good stand of corn. But it's yeah, we did put on our corn head, we did put the BT chopper head or knife rolls in there, and that made quite a difference. It's not really a chopping head, but it does a lot better job than no chopping. Here's some corn that's planted in rye. Maybe it was even the same field as you saw Tyler was planting in one of the last slides I showed you. But the rye you see is almost all dead, and you got a lot of cover on this field, and that stops erosion, and it adds to your organic matter. You know, just planting them this way just adds so much to your operation. Next slide.
Rod, we got a question about how do you terminate your cover crop and when?
This year, seeing as how the rye didn't come up until in the spring, we let the rye grow until 22nd of May was when we sprayed it. And I got a slide in here later on, I'll show you. But this other way, if the rye comes up in the fall and gets some size to it, it'll come up early in the spring, and then I would just anticipate spraying it a little earlier than we did this year. But this year we wanted to get some size on that rye, so we waited till later and sprayed it off. And I don't know if you asked about what we used. We used 32 ounces of Roundup. I don't know, somewhere in here I got to talk about my failures. It can't all be good. I've tried interseeding, and that first year I don't know, I had the elevator with their airflow. They floated crimson clover and annual ryegrass over the field, and we got a good stand around the outside. 90 feet was about the max. And then in this, you know, inside of that, we didn't have much luck with it. And I was really enthusiastic about it, thinking we can seed it in a cornfield and just let it go and it'll be great. But it didn't work out that simple. So I abandoned that idea. And the next year I decided to seed the rye in the fall after harvest. And again, I had the elevator spread it. And then I used a Phillips rotary harrow to try and cover it up. It covered some, but the rye was planted late, and it never come up in the fall, and it didn't come up very good in the spring either. It was just a few stands, nothing. It was just a complete failure. And then the next year, I thought I'd do a little better and had the elevator spread it again. And then I came in with a field cultivator, worked the ground a little so that we'd cover it, thinking that if the seed started to germinate or something, we'd have some dirt on it on top, and this would protect it maybe, and it would start growing. Never came up. Well, I shouldn't say never. Some of it came up in the spring. You know, I say maybe a third to a half of the piece had stands on it, and it was scattered. You know, it would be an acre here, an acre there. And I thought that this isn't working. So then I thought, I'm gonna put it on with our 15-inch corn planter. And I seeded that, and after it was seeded, I got an opportunity to acquire some liquid manure to incorporate on the land. And I was kind of a skeptic about this. I say, how is that rye going to ever come up through that manure? But I asked Martin Larson about it, and he's a real smart man. And he says, yeah, there's guys that do this, put liquid manure on, and they've had good luck with it, incorporated, and it comes up good. So I tried it, and it didn't come up in the fall, but again, it was a late fall. But in the spring, it came up like we're seeing here in the pictures. It shows a lot of green in here. It shows some bare spots. I will say this: we felt we had to dig a little of it where they put, you know, they got to push the hose around a lot in that field, and they put some ruts in it, and that hose piles up some dirt, but that's only about 10% of the field. So we did use the digger and level that off a little bit. And then it shows on the picture on the right, it shows us planting corn on the 1st of May well, it shows the rye that was planted late October, came up in it was seeded in 19 in 15-inch rows. In the spring it came up, and pretty good stand, and I was really happy with it. So we lost a lot of time in our goofing off and not planting that rye and getting good soil to seed contact. And to me, I think that's a must. We got to think about this when we plant these cover crops. Next slide. Now, I want you to pay particular attention to what we got here as opposed to the slide that's after this. Here was corn that was planted the 2nd of May. It had this cover crop on it, had manure on it. And he'd done a little digging out there, but not much. It was sprayed the 22nd, and the picture was taken the 20th of May. And you don't see any corn in here. This is all rye, this green stuff. Maybe there's a few weeds coming up in. I don't know if there's any weeds or not, but let's say there is weeds. And this rye was about, I suppose, probably 15 inches high. This stuff was sprayed 4 days earlier, so it has started to wilt down, and it wasn't dead by any means, but it had been wilting down. It don't look to be this tall now. And this rye was great stand, and anybody that went by that didn't know me and what cropping I do would think, that guy's a piss poor farmer and he don't raise nothing out there. I know he don't. It just looks horrible. And now, Shauna, turn the next page, next slide. This is what it looked like 2 months later. This corn is very thick, very leafy, very even. It's the kind of corn that everybody wants. And to think back to what that looked on the 26th of May, I think you'd have to agree that maybe I'm not quite that bad a farmer. It just looks a little tough, and this is typical of the no-till. It looks a little bit tough in the spring. Once you get it under control, it works wonderful, works wonderful. I couldn't be happier with it. Next slide.
Hey, Rod,
Yep.
there's a question in here about how much nitrogen you put down for your corn.
Okay. On bean ground, I put down about 140, 45 pounds. On the corn ground, I put down about 180 or 90. And I do it some with the planter. I don't put everything on with the planter anymore. It takes too much time. You fill the planter every 17 acres. I just don't have time for that. So I only put on about half the fertilizer, put on the other 75 pounds later on, about knee high or so. On most of these slides that I've been showing you, it's on bean ground with that manure on it. So there I cut it back about 50 pounds, figuring the manure would serve that purpose. And then I went back and top dressed it with a urea. So we figure that way we got the same amount of fertilizer on. And on corn ground, I upped that fertilizer, so we putting on about half with the planter, and we put the other half on when we top dress the corn. And So we're putting on about 180 to 90 pounds of fertilizer on the corn. Here is, Tyler had some prevent plant this year too. Well, it was prevent plant last year, but so this year he planted. And he planted the rye on the 19th in 15-inch rows. This shows the, well, first of all, he did some tiling in here. Was that every 50 feet or? Yeah, every 50 feet he put tile in. This farm was just terrible, terrible wet. So there's no rye in here. And you can barely, or on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side, you can barely see that where the rye is. But, and he put it on last fall, but the rye he'd planted like in April or July, late April or August. And so the rye is about this high when he planted in it. And of course, this was destroyed when the tile went in there, where it went in. In his planter, he's got one coulter and row cleaners in the front of each row. And he's got spike closing wheels, Martin spike closing wheels. He's got a chain that he drags behind it to kind of cover it up. Next slide. Here it shows his planter, the back end of it. We've looked at the front end. Here you can see those spike closing wheels. You don't see them very good, but they're Martin's spike closing wheels, and he's got the brackets on and a chain behind on each row. And you can see here that this planter don't tear up very much of the field. You know, it's works a little strip, probably 3 inches wide at the most. And he plants the corn right in it. Next slide. Now here's an interesting photograph that he has. It shows I don't know if you'll follow the mouse around or not, and if you got a small computer, you're not going to see see it very well. But he's got the seed down here. He's got the coleoptile coming up. It's going to break the soil in about 3/4 of an inch. And you got all these roots around it. And these are all white roots. They're live, they're living, they're off the rye. And he's going to kill the rye, which is shown in the picture on your right. And down here is, and I don't know if you see it or not, but down here is the seed, and here's the rye above ground, and it's killed. And it's just marvelous, the amount of residue that you got above the ground here when the rain comes down, it doesn't get impacted with that hard splashing that washes your soil away. Next slide. Next slide, Shauna. Here's a better looking at what it looks on the top side. Can we go back a slide? Well, we'll just leave it here. This corn this is my corn, and it's planted in my field I got behind the house. Shows a lot of rye, and it shows some bean stubble, and it shows some rye stubble in there too. And a good stand, just like you see it. Next slide.
Rod, do you want me to try and go back? I can do that.
How are we on time?
It is 2:15. You got about 10 more minutes?
Yeah, we can go back.
All right, let's see if I can figure that out.
Or if it's hard to go back, why? We can leave it too.
Yeah, I don't know. For some reason, my computer's acting weird. Okay, maybe we can come back to it later. Let's
Yeah, okay. We'll take the next slide. You know, I used to think that these tillers were a kind of a bad thing, that individual plants came up, sometimes they tillered off to the side, and I used to think they were like a weed. But now I'm thinking maybe they got a purpose. And you usually see them if the corn is thin planted or if they got real good fertility. I would say, first of all, this is pretty good fertility here. But these little suckers down here, tillers, you know, they could, early in the life cycle of corn, when the stuff is small, they can intercept light very well too, and they can compete with the main stalk. And then maybe, just maybe, I don't know for sure, but I would say that maybe when it's running low on nutrients, that plant has the opportunity to cannibalize these tillers and provide additional feed for the plant. And I'm going to spend a lot of time looking at this in the fall or even now and see if there's any truth to that. Next slide. Here we got, you can see me over on the left-hand side a little bit. You can just see that red shirt or pink shirt or whatever. And right at shoulder height, you can see these ears forming in here. And that's about 5 feet high. My eyeballs are a little just above the shirt there. And I still got 4.5 feet to the top of the plant. And this is, you know, I say it's a problem because this corn always grows so darn high, tall on my farm. And I don't know why. Normally you'll walk in and expect to see something maybe 8 feet high or 7.5. I don't know why the corn wants to grow that high. I think if you could shorten that up and put more of it in the ear, you'd have something, but it's just something to think about. Next slide. Here's later on in the season, 31st of July, and you can see this residue in here is really broken down. The rye residue is completely gone. You don't see much of the bean stubble in here. The only thing is bits of the corn that were planted 2 years ago. That corn takes a long time to break down because of that high carbon to nitrogen ratio. But you can see that there's not much residue left. Next slide. Here's our beans again. These beans, it looks, it looks very, very good. And there's not much to say. They were planted no-till. I suppose we could have tried to get the spread out the beans, tried to get down to the bottom where the soil was to see if there's much cover. There is good cover in the on the ground. This corn didn't break down too much, and it won't until next summer. Next slide. Here I am. I'm just looking at an ear of corn, and I don't know. I'm looking at how good it pollinated, and pollinated pretty good. There's just a tiny tip on the ear that didn't pollinate. You can go to the next slide. And here I am. I'm raising that nice field of corn. Just happy, and I want to thank you for joining us in this little experiment, and I hope that you learned a little something from this today. And I guess at this time we can take questions. Shauna.
Hey, Rod.
Yeah.
We had a question about moisture and how your fields are comparing to some of the fields around you with the little bit of moisture we've had this last month.
I think they're competing. They look, it's very, very similar. They don't really show the lack of moisture now, but I think, boy, another week, I think it's really going to start hurting on it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we always want rain, except when we don't want it. So I guess we take what we get. And what was the other part of the question?
Just how they're comparing to the fields around you at this point.
Yeah, I'd say they're pretty similar. I personally think this is. I don't like to tell you that it's, I'm better than anybody else, but I wouldn't trade this system for nothing. No matter how much money they paid me, they wouldn't. No matter how much money they couldn't get me to leave this no-till behind. It's just, I don't know, it just works so good. It saves the soil. Everything about it is just, and the time that you put in, plowing it or disking it or 4 or 5 trips over the field, it's just wasted. It's recreational tillage is what they're doing. you never convinced me to go back.
Well, there's some high praises. There was also, ideally, when would you like to be planting your fall cover crop? If October's kind of late for you.
Well, I think if you could get them in by the, I would say the 15th, even earlier might be better. But this year we got a lot of 1.5 beans. We used to plant 2.0s, and then we went to 1.8s and 1.2s or 1.6s. This year we got a lot of 1.5 beans, and they may, I don't know, these beans are funny. You think the early beans aren't going to do well, but sometimes they do. And I wonder if it isn't to do with, you want them beans to flower when the days are the longest. And you put a later bean in, it's not going to flower when the days are getting shorter. And we'll see this fall what they do with these earlier beans, and that'll help us a lot on this no-till, getting that rye in there sooner.
Rod, did you want to explain the one slide we didn't get to? I think it's pulled up
Pardon?
now. Do you want to explain the one slide that we didn't get to?
What?
I think it's pulled up right now.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that just shows the rye is dead and the corn is coming up through there, and it shows a lot of stalks and trash in there. This is what you want. You want it to look like this.
Great. I'm going to stop sharing so we can see everyone.
What time is it?
It is 2:26. If you have questions, more questions for Rod, we are going to take some time here at 2:30 to go ahead and keep pestering him with questions. But in the meantime, I know that some people run on a tight schedule, so I just want to wrap up. So if you need to leave at 2:30, you can do so. First off, I just want to say thank you again for taking the time to join us today. And really thank Rod. If people can give like a round of applause, a quiet round of applause for him. Really appreciate him taking the learning time to figure out Zoom and how to present online. It's no easy task for anyone. So really appreciate you again, Rod, for doing that. And before people start taking off here, what I would like to do is to do a survey. You can actually do surveys over Zoom, and it's actually pretty slick. So I'm going to send that out here, and all you have to do is answer the questions, and then I'm going to try and share the results with you. Again, this is pretty new for me as well, so I am learning how to do this too. But let's see if I can get this going. All right, so you should have a poll come up now that's going to ask you some questions. Go ahead and take a minute or two to answer those, and I can see on my end how many people have answered.
This is hooked up to the computer. I don't know if it gets us or not.
Looks like we've got about a third of the people who have answered.
Yeah. Where's the no? Boy. Yeah, well, I didn't check them, but. Oh, yeah, I did, yeah. Yeah, I do.
Huh. Okay, looks like we got 14 people who voted. I'm not sure if everyone actually got in on that or if it was time sensitive, but I'm going to share the results of what we got so far. So we had 12 of 14 people who had submitted results and made changes on their farm this past year. That's pretty remarkable. That's really cool. Looks like most people tried cover crop practices this past year, which is great. 7 out of 14 people. And it does look like we had one interseeder and some expanded grazing practices. That's great. And most people are making changes on that smaller acreage size, 10 to 50 acres. So that's always good for trying new things out, new practices out. Great, thank you so much for doing that. Yes, and then if one of the things that prompted you was to sign up for the Soil Builders Network, Alex just dropped a comment into the chat that you can go and learn more about our Soil Builders Network if you follow that link. Okay, and I did see that in the chat that Alex, you were asked if Rod can show off his tractor collection. All right, I might have to go help him do that if we actually want to have that happen. And then if people want to stick around, we're going to just take some more Q&A with Rod. But if you need to take off, go ahead and do so. You just press that little red button down at the bottom of the page. And again, thank you for joining us. Stick around. We'll definitely end the meeting here at 2:45. So if you got some more questions for Rod, stay on the line. I think we're going to try and go show off the tractor collection here.
Oh.
Want to show off your tractors?
Oh, let's see.
Yeah. All right, so what we're going to do like this. You can see it. Want to stand next to your.
Well, maybe they can't see the tractors. You can show them. That's only about 40% of them.
It's only 40% of them? Where are your other ones?
They're all in the basement.
Oh, in the basement. That's awesome. Okay. All right, I'm going to go back out there.
Maybe there's, I don't know, I think a lot of them in the basement.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I have questions.
Yeah, that is only 40% of the total collection. He's got 60% more down in his basement. All right, if you have any more questions for Rod, you can either type it into the chat or if you want to, take yourself off of mute and just ask him directly.
Hey Rod, are you using traditional hybrids for your corn? I mean, you're using Roundup to kill the rye, so I assume you're using a Roundup Ready corn.
Yes. Uh, uh, I got all Roundup corn. My son's got all non-GMO corn. It's he's on the cheap side. He's and I don't think that mine's particular any better than his is. It's just that he doesn't want to pay that technology fee.
What's he killing his rye with, or is he just doing it early enough so that he doesn't need to use Roundup Ready corn?
Well, he plants it in the rye and then he sprays it, but he has to get out there before the corn comes up.
And is he using a non-seed treated seed as well then with the traditional, or is he using seed treatment?
Has he got any seed?
I'm usually using
Is Tyler speaking right now? Because we can't hear him if he is.
Yeah.
Okay, you'll have to go right in front of the computer.
Yeah, this is Tyler here. I've planted non-treated seed before, just on a small scale. The first year, it seemed to go fine. The second year I tried it, it seemed like I had a little bit of stand loss, and I had to pay extra for the seed to get non-treated. And I just said, well, if I got to pay extra for it and I'm going to lose stand, I'm just not going to screw around with it. So I'm just using the standard treatment now.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Rod, Dwayne here. What are you seeding right now as far as corn population?
We seed about 35,000, and it comes up a little bit under that, but usually it's pretty darn good. Just about every stalk grows, every seed counts.
What, Dwayne, again, I'm going to ask a question that to anybody who wants to answer it. I asked it in the chat room that I got into, and it was right at the end. I remember last winter in Stewartville, most of the speakers there were talking about using vertical tillage. You know, we were talking about cover crops, we were talking about no-till, and then it seemed like they were all using that. I asked that question there and didn't get a clear answer. I'm going to ask it again now. So do we consider shallow vertical tillage, for instance, to incorporate that fall cover crop? What's people's reaction as that relates to, is it still no-till or not? I'm not doing it, but I just wanted to know what, I've been using a 15-inch drill at this point.
Well, if you're using a light drill, what are they? What are they called them?
The drill?
Well, I'm
No,
using my no-till drill, but like I said, I've seen last winter, they seemed like they were all using spread and light vertical tillage.
Okay.
My question for all the no-tillers out there, and I'm a no-tiller, been no-tilling for many, many years. And it's been stated here a couple times that, you know, any tillage is bad. So I'm trying to get a verification. Does everybody think that's bad or not bad?
Well, you know, there's all kinds of tillage practices out there now. And I don't see this using these turbo tills and stuff out there. But maybe, you know, if you've used it, you're happy with it, keep using it, but if you think you can get by without it, just do it. I encourage you to do your own thing. It's
Well, I've been doing the 15-inch, like I said, no-till. I have to hire somebody to do it. They show up, they don't show up. I don't get 100% of my beans cover crop on it just because of that. So that's why I thought about doing it to the spread, have them spread with the fertilizer. And then, like I said, these guys last winter were all using that shallow tillage to try to incorporate it. That's all I'm asking. I don't know if anybody's going to give me the answer. Is it still no-till or not no-till?
Dwayne, I'm just going to interrupt because I think I know who you're talking about, which was Everett Rolfing, who presented at that Stewartville meeting. And Lance Klessig works pretty closely with him. So I'm going to see, I know Lance is on the call. Hopefully he's sitting there. Lance, could you answer some of Dwayne's questions?
Sure, I can try. I mean, I think it's just like anything, it's a matter of opinion. So, yes, he's still no-tilling in the spring, but he did a little bit of tillage in the fall to get that cover crop coming. So, I suppose by the book, it's not 100% no-till, but for him, that works pretty well to get his rye established, and that's what he feels as far as a time and efficiency standpoint. So.
Thanks, Lance.
I've had really good success just broadcasting with potash as a carrier in the fall and letting it do what it does. And if it's late, because you get your beans out late, it may not start growing in the fall, but it'll grow up in the spring. And so I've had really good success that way without having to use any tillage.
Well, that goes along with the no-till and my no-till drill. We've had that in late too, and then we've had an early cold, and we haven't had anything come up, or you can go out there and just barely see a little fuzz, then it germinated, and then all of a sudden in the spring it's coming back up again. So yes, it might work both ways.
Phil from Preston, I see that you've made a couple comments in here. Did you have any questions or did you want to make any points? I know you put a lot of things in the chat.
Okay, I'm here. No, I guess I said what I needed to by typing, right?
Okay, thanks. Just wanted to check.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey Rod, I'm curious if you've used any cost share throughout the years to plant any of your cover crops?
Yes, I have. The soil conservation had a program, I think that ran for 3 years, where you could use, you got $30 an acre to plant cover crops. I used that. And on the no-till planting, I was planting no-till long before they had offered that, money for the no-tilling. I think they had $30 for that too. And they wouldn't give me any of that because I was already no-tilling, and they saved the money for somebody else.
Okay, go help Mama.
Any last burning questions?
Now's your time to ask the questions. Pretty soon Shauna's gonna cut them off.
I'm gonna boot you out.
This is Phil from Preston again. I would say don't be afraid of those group 1.5 and 1.7 beans, because they are yield makers now. And you had mentioned you're curious to see what kind of yield you're going to get. Everything depends on the weather and every year is different, but man, they can make beans if you give them a chance.
Yeah. And I think there's something to that about
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We'll just call it a wrap. Thanks for all the great questions and the engagement and dealing with us on Zoom. So really appreciate seeing you all. Go ahead and just press that end button down in the bottom right corner.